Hey everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. I was sent a prototype copy of Fallen Angels by Side Room Games. Fallen Angels is a cooperative hand management deduction card game with 40 cards and plays in 20 to 30 minutes. It's the 1920s and Sydney, Australia is infested with widespread crime where razor-wielding gangsters rule the streets controlled by rival crime queens. Now, good thing you signed up to be on the right side of things. You and your fellow players play as the police. Holding cells are crowded and you need to find evidence to convict each suspect brought to you. But be careful because one little slip-up could leave a criminal walking free on the streets. The game is set up by separating the 30 suspect cards from the crime scene cards from the tableau cards. Place the 4 tableau cards out: convicted, acquitted, informants, and discarded. The goal of the game is to convict 12 suspects before 3 are acquitted. Informants will help you in deducing and identifying evidence used to convict suspects. The discarded pile is used to place cards that aren't in the game any longer. The suspect cards are double-sided and feature evidence icons on them. One of the 2 icons is always repeated on the reverse side. The number underneath shows how many court appearances you must be successful with to secure conviction. Lastly, each icon shows how to manipulate the card after you are successful on guessing the evidence on the reverse side. If a card shows 2 of these icons, then you are able to pick which one you'd like to perform. The crime scene cards will help mask information, be used as a player aid, and also help separate players' hands when giving information to the active player. Each player will have a hand of suspects, and you'll do this at the beginning of the game first by randomly removing a suspect card for each player in the game. The remaining suspect cards will be arranged so that the 3 is on the top left corner. The cards will then be shuffled under the table, and the top 12 cards are rotated 180 degrees without flipping them. Depending on the level of gameplay, you can shuffle the cards and hand out player decks in a beginning level game. You can shuffle them and then count out the top 12 cards again and flip those over from top to bottom, and then shuffle them again for normal difficulty. And for advanced difficulty, you can then continue this process and then turn the whole entire pack over from left to right and shuffle them again. The harder you want the game, the more steps you will need to shuffle these cards up. After mixing up the cards depending on the level of difficulty, you'll make player decks depending on the number of players in the game. You'll place a crime scene card on top, and then you'll count out the number of cards that player needs, including counting the crime scene card. Each player will then have a crime scene card on top of a different number of cards: 12 in a 2-player game, 8 in a 3-player game, and 6 in a 4-player game. The remaining 6 cards will then be placed on the informant cards and be used when you need a little help. Now on your turn, you'll be the active player and you will collapse your hand, keeping the crime scene card in front. You will then choose one of your cards and place it in the back and elevate it up. Make sure you only elevate it enough that you see the icons that are shown in the top left. All other players will be able to see the top icons on the card that are facing them. The other players will need to try to hint to the active player what the critical piece of evidence is so that they can convict this suspect. All other players will arrange their cards depending on the icons that they can see on the active player's suspect card. One side will show icons that are not on the suspect's card. The crime scene will be placed somewhat in the middle to separate the 2 sides. And the other side will show cards that have at least one of the icons. The active player will need to look at the other player's card and deduce the key evidence that is missing. If at any time you are unsure, you can ask an informant. The other players will then tell you how many of the icons on top of the informant card can be seen on the back of your suspect card. After using an informant, it'll be discarded. When you think you know what the icons are on the back of your suspect card, you can then declare them to the group. If correct, you carry out the action shown on the suspect card. This might be rotating it 180 degrees, flipping it from top to bottom, or placing it in the convicted pile. If you are wrong, then you will need to add this card to the acquitted pile. The game ends when you have convicted 12 suspects or the 3rd suspect is acquitted. If you convict 12 suspects, everyone wins. If 3 suspects are acquitted due to your shoddy police work, then you all lose the game. Now this is a great little deduction game. At first it's kind of hard to understand that each card's orientation is very important to the game, and flipping the card or rotating it can only be done when following the rules to do it. So you just need to be aware of how to handle your cards. Also, it's important to know that after you have shown your cards to the active player, dividing them enough to help that player deduce their target icon, you will then need to shuffle your cards again without changing the orientation of a single card. And then when it's your turn, you won't have any added benefits on how you previously orientated your cards. Again, in the game, it's really important to understand that on one side of a card, when there are 2 icons, the other side will have one of those other 2 icons. And then on the flip side, if you see a card that has 1 icon on it, you know that on the other side, that exact same icon is on the other side with another icon. This will help you to try to deduce and figure out what might be missing. The lovely thing about the game is being able to deduce these icons and feel like you know what icon or evidence to use to put the criminal away. But it's also easy to mix things up in your head and accidentally get the icon wrong. So it's a game of taking the hints given to you and using your brain to deduce the needed icon. The game uses historical mugshots of actual known criminals or suspects arrested in Sydney, Australia during the Razor Gang era. So make sure you pay attention to the art and the pictures in the game. Bring in your best informants and detective work when you bring down criminals from Australia of the 1920s in Fallen Angels by Side Room Games. Again, this is Boardgame Brody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.